Hello and welcome to Practical Serverless. My name is Jared, and today we're going to learn how to use Serverless Framework to deploy functions to the cloud. Cool. So what is serverless? Serverless does not equal no servers. As Paul Bigger put it, much better than I could, there are servers in serverless, you just don't have to think about it. All it means is that somebody else is managing it, all we have to worry about is the business logic. So first of all, I want to talk about some terms, just so we have a better idea before we get started. So there's service, and a service is just a collection of code that's all served from a single place. It can contain one or more functions. So it's like the overarching part of it. No big deal. Stage, you can think of it like the environment. Typically when we're developing, when they're talking about development environment, production environment, etc., stage is just the same thing. It's just a different name. Function, the definition from the documentation. A piece of code that executes when called. Nice. All right. All we need to know is that in relation to services, there's a bunch of functions that are going to be in there. Simply put. And then finally, provider. So the provider is the people who are managing the services on our behalf. We're giving them money, or hopefully not if we stay below the free tier. And they're managing all the servers for us. So that could be like AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. There's probably a million other ones out there, but those are the popular ones. So today we're going to use some tools. We're going to use the Serverless Framework. We're going to use NPM, and we're going to use AWS CLI. So without further ado, let's get this thing started. All right, so let's install some dependencies. If you don't have NPM installed already, go ahead and install that. It should be installed automatically with Node if you have that installed. The second thing we're going to install is Serverless Framework, which I talked about earlier. And then we're also going to install the AWS CLI. So the easiest way to do that, run over to your terminal, npm, not in uppercase, npm install global serverless. All right, cool. And next thing we're going to install, we're going to use Homebrew. If you're not familiar with Homebrew, oops, it is a package manager for OS X or Linux. It's great. I use it to install almost everything. Anyhow, so brew install AWS CLI. Easy peasy. All right. So the next thing we got to do is we got to configure the provider. And as I mentioned, the provider is the place in where your serverless service is going to be deployed to. I use AWS for all of my stuff for no particular reason, but you can use whatever cloud service you want. Google Cloud, Azure, whatever. So first things first, got to go sign up. Once you've signed up, head over to the management console and you should end up here. So these ways to find services, either you can type it in here or up here. No big deal. So what we got to do is we've got to create a IAM user. And IAM is what you use to manage your users for access throughout the entire AWS ecosystem. So go to IAM. The first thing we got to do is we're going to create a policy for managing the SLS function. So go ahead and click on create policy. Let's use JSON, and we're actually going to steal this JSON from somewhere else. Now this is from the official serverless docs. I'll include the link in the video. But we're basically just going to take all of that and we're going to dump it in here. And we're going to call this. The key for IAM is to try and minimize the amount of things that whatever you're using it for has access to. So in this case, all we need access to for basic serverless functions, API gateway, CloudFormation, EC2s, etc. So create policy. Cool. So now we have the policy created. Now we're going to create a user. We're going to add a new user. SLS test agent. Make sure you click the programmatic access. Attach existing policies, filter policies, customer managed. And there's that one that we just did. You can add tags if you want. And create user. So these two things are highly important because it's what you're going to use to access the system. So make sure you copy these somewhere, and because we'll be using them later. So there's two different ways that you can manage your AWS profile. One is via the serverless command line, and another is via the AWS command line. So for the serverless command line, by the way, all serverless commands can just be written as SLS, which saves a lot of typing. So config, credentials, put the provider flag on there as AWS, put the key flag, and that's where we get this from. And then put the secret flag on there, which is this. And it will kick it out because I already have a default profile, and you might too. So go ahead and put that back on there, put the O flag on it, voila. Now the second way to do it is do the AWS command line. So AWS configure, and it'll tell you what's currently in there as the default profile. So that matches that, that matches that. Cool. Now that we got it all set up finally, let's actually create a project. So using the serverless command line, SLS create, use the template flag to start it with the template. That's a pretty good template to start with. If you're working in Node, it gives you just super basic files. All right. And then we're also going to pass a path flag, which basically just creates a directory and puts all the files in there. And if you don't, it'll just put you in your current working directory, which I don't know why you want to do that, but you can if you want. So SLS test. Cool, created. So let's change dir SLS test. As you can see, there's two files in there. Let's check it out. So the handler is a pretty basic function. It's just an async function that's going to return this kind of stuff. And then our serverless.yaml, that's where all the magic happens. Name of the service, or the provider, and it gives you all this additional information. But we're not going to worry about that right now. We'll go over that in a different video. So to check out to make sure that it worked, SLS invoke local -f hello. Voila. And as you can see, your function executed successfully is what it says in here. So cool. Whoops. All right. Now let's test the deployment. So SLS deploy. All right, awesome. But where did it go? So since we set up AWS as the provider, it went to AWS. So if you go to your management console, check out Lambda. First, you want to click on Applications, and then here it is, SLS test-dev. So the default stage is always going to be dev. That's just the way they have it set up. And then within that, you got functions, and it's this one. So all this stuff is in here. You can take a look at it. All this stuff is out here. So let's test it out. SLS invoke function hello. Look at that. Same output, except this time it's coming from the cloud. And that's it. We've deployed our first function to the cloud. This is going to be the first in many videos and articles about serverless. So keep your eyes peeled for Practical Serverless out there on the interwebs. I've dropped a bunch of links in the bottom, and yeah, that's about it. Happy coding.